What's today's date?
March the 5th.
What year?
Why, 1917.
1917.
Yes, that's correct. Well, isn't it?
Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Pwn, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone-based podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host, Fred.
Hello.
How you doing this week, Fred?
I'm good, but more importantly, how Yin's doing, John?
Yin's am well. Hang on, let me check my guidebook. Yes, that's okay.
Yeah, well is classic Pittsburgh slang. You've just completed the big move from the Austin of Texas to the Austin of Pennsylvania.
Correct.
Pittsburgh.
Correct.
How's it feeling?
It's good. We're still kind of working out the kinks of the move, but
The new studio setup that's the first priority, I assume.
Yeah. We had contractors in this rental that we're in, building out the space, so we haven't been able to move in yet. The kids, they're staying at a Hojo. They're fine.
Yeah, cool. As long as we get the baffling in there, we're in good shape. I have a sneaking suspicion that there's going to be a lot more Steelers content working its way into our podcast this upcoming year, but time will tell.
Anything new going on with you?
Kind of appropriately enough for this episode, about to get on a flight for Germany on Friday. So just in time, we're doing a World War I themed episode.
Great. We are doing The Last Flight, a first season episode, the 18th of the production run. It aired originally on February 5th, 1960.
Witness Flight Lieutenant William Terrence Decker, Royal Flying Corps, returning from a patrol somewhere over France. The year is 1917. The problem is that the lieutenant is hopelessly lost. Lieutenant Decker will soon discover that a man can be lost not only in terms of maps and miles, but also in time. And time in this case can be measured in eternities.
Yeah, in the Twilight
Zone. Yeah.
Few. It's first season episodes. We hadn't quite gotten into the habit there of putting that little button on it. We like to do our own Serling-style intros. I had this sort of disconcerting experience of opening up my notes for the show and just seeing a wall of text for my intro that I wrote a few days ago. So maybe I should just...
Do we want to maybe just make that a separate bonus cast?
Yeah, exactly. Just a nice 20-minute side episode of Fred's one-man Serling show. But I should probably get mine out of the way.
All right.
On this show, we pride ourselves on unsettling audiences with the uncanny and the unexpected. Put simply, our bailiwick is bizarrity. However, tonight's episode takes the proverbial crazy cake. We start with Flight Lieutenant Terry Decker, Royal Flying Corps, returning from a patrol somewhere over France. The year is 1917. However, he's flying a Newport 28. I'll say that again. It's 1917, and he's flying a Newport 28, an aircraft that wasn't fully in service until 1918. When Decker lands, he talks big about being in the 56th Squadron. Yes, that's right, the same 56th Squadron that wasn't deployed until a month later. I'll pause to let you pick up your jaw off the floor. When Decker is subsequently interrogated about his twisted tale, the plot thickens. Not only are the laurel leaves on his fruit salad positioned to the wrong side, but his cuff stripes are too wide, his rank pips are too small, his holster is the Plaiddale R5 instead of R6, and as for the matter of his flight cap, well, I'm not sure I can slip that one past the censors. Yes, it's potentially the most disturbing episode of the Incorrect Military Minutia Zone, a.k.a. the Twilight Zone.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I hope it was worth it.
It's the most noticeable thing about this episode for me. So
yeah, certainly. The whole time traveling thing kind of just flew by in a flash, but the rank pips being wrong was where my attention was at.
When we get to trivia, we're going to have to really buckle down here. We might have to kind of, skirt the plot, give it short shrift, so we can really get into the military screw-ups.
Yeah.
They're big, people.
Yeah. Military screw-up should be our next podcast.
Right.
What about you?
Aerial dogfight photography of Lieutenant Handsome Decker, pilot in His Majesty's Royal Flying Circus during the Great War, going plano a plano against such fabled flyers as the Red Baron. But there will be no peanut strips or personal pan pizza promotions in Decker's future, For Decker is, in air jargon, what is known as a whiskey delta. More politely phrased, a coward who has tried to escape the past by riding the jet stream into the Twilight Zone.
That was good. Plano a Plano. I'm impressed that you were able to pull that off in the middle of a hectic move. Did you write that when you were kind of like cruising America's highways in the big rig with all the family?
I was sitting around the house today while in the rental we had a leaky gas, and someone had to come in and install new pipes, so I was kind of sitting staring at the walls for a while that got fixed.
High on fumes. Yeah, I was wondering if it was maybe another selection from www.jokesforyou/planes or whatever.
No, but not unlike in the past when I had to go to a motorcycle jargon website. I did, look up some airplane jargon for that Whiskey Delta thing.
Cool, sweet. So this is a first season episode. Consider this your official spoiler warning. We're about to spoil the plot. So if you are worried about that, check it out on Netflix or Hulu or YouTube. But definitely buy the DVDs and Blu-rays because they come packed with all kind of features that we don't know about because we don't have them. Or maybe you have them, but I think they're in storage.
Well, I do, but my DVD player started eating DVDs, so I've stopped being able to watch them. But it's a great set.
Well, whatever excuse is,
yeah.
You have no excuse not to know the plot because we're about to dive right in. It starts with our hero, Lieutenant Decker. What is a lieutenant? I've never understood this, and I'm counting on you to pull me out here.
British pronunciation of the.
Yeah, but what? Why? I get that. I get that, but it's like they
Why
say
is-
schedule, and that kind of makes sense. But there's no F in lieutenant.
I don't know. Why do we say an F in enough?
Mind blown. It's gonna be hard to keep going after that. So Lieutenant Decker is flying his plane over the territory of France in the thick
Plane. Come on, Fred. Give it some respect.
What is it?
You know what it is. It's a
It's
Newport
true.
28.
It's a Newport 28. As several military sticklers have pointed out on IMDb. He's flying a Newport 28 over France in the thick of World War I. And he appears to be lost. And as Serling gives us the intro, Decker makes his way down to an airfield and lands in the middle of a music cue that alerts us to the fact that something is shocking because he's landed in the present day of 1959 and sees like a very 1959-looking airfield when he lands.
Right.
The problem of watching it in 2015
Exactly.
creates a character from the faraway past traveling to the slightly less faraway past.
Right.
And you're like, damn, that plane looks a little less old-timey than that plane.
Yeah, look at all these historical planes floating around. This is great. It's like a plane museum down there.
Yeah, that's the immediate thought that you think of. It's just like these planes next to each other in like some sort of plane museum or a model. And it's like that kind of stuff just flattens it. So the effect is not quite as shocking.
Yeah, at the time, it supposedly was quite jarring. But yeah, they just all look like, old plane.
The lieutenant is confused, and he's also confused because the people who come up to greet him are American. And there's like a whole base set up, and he's like, I didn't realize you Jerry's was, or I guess not Jerry's. What would Yanks?
Yanks.
Yes,
Yanks.
you Yanks were so far advanced. Right ho, old boys. And he deplanes and follows them into what we learn is American Air Force Base in Reims or Rome. I don't actually know how to pronounce that. In France.
Guess maybe
Reims,
is it like Con Rain?
Well,
Maybe
it's
you don't
can,
say
not
the
con.
Well, exactly. So it's probably Ran.
Yeah, ran France.
So did you notice there's a little bit where he's walking into the building and they pass a female
I know
officer?
what you're talking about. Yeah.
And he kind of does a double take, which I think the point is supposed to be, he's a 1917 air flight officer, and he's kind of like, whoa, female in the military? But I couldn't help but thinking, wouldn't just being in the late 50s or early 60s, wouldn't you have the same reaction of, wait, what's a woman doing in the military?
They were maybe exaggerating the level of military progress that had been made at the time. That was more of an optimistic joke. I was kind of taken off guard because my initial reaction was like, was he just horn dogging on that? Was this like a weird character moment where it's like the Randy time traveling British pilot?
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Very
First
glad,
of many.
glad we got that in there. I was also kind of fixated on his outfit. I think they did really good. He's a World War I pilot, obviously. He's got those like sort of insane pants called jodhpurs. They're those pants that like are narrow at the ankles but really
they flare
balloony
really wide at the hip,
at the waist, and potentially I would guess Middle Eastern origin. I'm not quite sure, but I think the idea was just that like they had their pants like that to keep their like areas cool in a hotter climate.
Yeah, there's a lot of space there, so they put in these elaborate heating and cooling systems where air
like
would be pushed through a series of tubes.
Right. You've got like an AC unit in your fly. But they look quite ridiculous and fun.
They call them mine somehow like horse riding or something.
They are,
but,
yes, they are. They are based on horse riding, yeah.
Yeah, but for some reason they put them on in planes. So I assume it had something to do with heating and cooling, but maybe it was just... the Air Force was kind of like the creme de la creme, so maybe they just put on the outfits to look extra badass.
Yeah, fancy pants.
Exactly. That's probably where the term came from.
Exactly. And maybe it's because they used to fly Pegasus before they flew planes.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of crossover between horse riding and plane riding, as it's called. So Decker gets taken to the principal's office to get a chewing out.
Who are you? Second Lieutenant William Terence Decker, sir, Royal Flying Corps.
You mean Royal Air Force?
No, sir. Royal Flying Corps.
What are you doing here? Why are you dressed like that?
I beg your pardon, sir.
Is there some kind of an air show nearby?
Air show, sir.
Are you making a film?
I'm afraid I don't quite understand you, sir.
You don't understand. Why are you wearing this costume?
He kind of has one of those, like, IMDb nitpicker attitudes.
Right. He's about to go after the pips, you can tell.
Yeah. It's one step away from that.
So did this remind you at all of, and I know these are out of sequence, but it remind you at all of the bit from Odyssey of Flight 33 with the, like, name of LaGuardia?
Oh, yeah.
Or the FAA versus
Yeah, like
Federal
it
Aviation.
implies a familiarity with the fact that, like, in World War I it was called the Royal Flying Corps, and in World War II it was called the Royal Air Force.
Right. I don't know. It's just, it's like it's a good device. I don't know. Over the course of 150 episodes, it's not crazy to use the same basic idea, but I think maybe we're just so close to it all that it seemed like, oh, okay, it's that kind of note again of a slightly renamed bureaucracy as a tip of something being wrong.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like, the bigger thing is that he walks in looking like a goddamn clown. So I think that, like, the fact that he flew there on an old plane and is dressed that way, there's a staging of shocks. Like, I don't think that, like, they didn't put, like, a big, like, dun 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 for the name of the bureaucracy, but I agree that was kind of a thing they'd use.
It's just similar, yeah.
Yeah. So the 1959 airplane boss, he actually has a name. It's like he's a major general, not just a general, but a major general. What's his name?
Yeah, Principal Wilson.
Right, exactly.
I don't know if this was in the like pages of IMDb complaints, so maybe I'm just like reading too much into it. But the major general looks like he has 3 stars on his pips or on his shoulders. But he's got 2 stars on his nameplate. I just wondered.
I don't know. I think you've become one of them. I think you've gone native.
Slide.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't notice that. I just noticed, like, I got the idea that he was.
I hope somebody got fired for that one.
Me too. Let's go back in time and do it. They have like a little bit of like dancing around the issue, and then finally he comes out and just asks him point blank what year he thinks it is. And Decker, I don't know, he kind of like scales up to it. Like, the major's like, when is it? And he's like, why, it's 3:00, sir. No, the day, March 17th, sir. Or the 17th. No, the month. Like, it just really builds up. But finally we get to the fact that he thinks it's 1917, when of course it's 1959.
That exchange kind of reminded me a little bit of the exchange in the first Terminator movie, which I doubt it was, a direct lift. But it is a good way of revealing the, like, when is it? Someone says the date. What year? And then they're way off. It builds the tension. It's a little silly, but it builds the tension well.
I think it's the longer you can draw it out. You know what I mean? Start with the day of the week, then the second, then the minute, then the hour.
Right.
Decker can't believe it. In fact, there's even a weird little moment where he like just mouths 1959. Did you notice that? Did you feel like the audio just got cut out?
Exactly. Yeah. I thought that it was a problem on my end.
I
Glad to know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe someone can write in and explain that to us. But he either mouths it or they messed up on the sound because he's so shocked he can't even say 1959 out loud. But then he walks over to the window and there's apparently, like, right next to this guy's office, there's a jet taking off. Like, the way they film it, it's like you can reach
Maverick!
out. Yeah, it's like he looks out and the jet is right effing there.
He's doing a flyby.
Yeah, and that proves it. And then not only is the jet right there, but like this mysterious cloud is right there. This window is like a weird like viewfinder.
Yeah, there's like a newspaper right there. It says 1959.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
got it all.
There's this mysterious cloud that Decker sees when he's looking out the window. And he explains that in 1917 he took off, and in the midst of some Air Force shenanigans, he ended up disappearing into a cloud. And there's a kind of a weird little historical reference here to a French air pilot named Guinemer or something like that. I forget exactly how to say the name, but that is a real pilot, which is just kind of cool that they threw it in there, although they messed up the reference because
Too bad they totally blew it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let them go on the Pips, but Guinemer is just such a well-known pilot. He died, actually.
What you would call an act of les incompetents.
Yes. Nice Home Alone. Nice tag there. But the real pilot Guinemer actually died later in the year 1917, so that's a goof. But whatever, it's a cool little bit. And so he's surmising that he's disappeared into this cloud, and this cloud has taken him forward somewhere in time. Somewhere in all that discussion, a guy named Alexander Mackay comes up, who in Decker's time in 1917 was a captain, but in the present day is some bigwig, conveniently enough, en route to this very base for a tour of inspection.
I suppose you're going to tell us you don't know that Alexander Mackay, Air Vice Marshal Alexander Mackay, is at this moment en route to this base for a tour of inspection.
But that's impossible,
Why is it impossible, Lieutenant Decker?
because he's dead.
The character we've never heard of might be dead. It's a shocking moment.
I don't know what the director was doing, because these two actors just tend to turn on the drop of a hat and start screaming at each other in the middle of seemingly stable dialogue. They'll just kind of go for it and then calm down very quickly. They're very up and down.
One of them is, has just gotten out of a dogfight, and the other one's got a lot of bureaucratic tangles. Yeah, exactly.
It just didn't seem as carefully modulated, the performances, as you maybe like. Like, I thought the British guy actually, gave a good performance. It's the angry to calm to angry didn't seem like it was going as smooth. It's like when you're, working the clutch on an old car. It just kind of was jolting me. When
or on an old Newpont 28, John? Perhaps. Touche. I think they got you. Point Twilight Zone, John. Anyway, so in the next scene, the airplane boss, I think his name is Harper, and his crony are looking through all of Decker's old crap, which is totally authentic and would fetch exorbitant prices on eBay. And they're trying to figure out what's going on. They think it's all just some crazy hoax, even though all of his like little British military stuff seems very real. And then the crony, sort of the lesser military guy, comes in. I think his name is Hank. And he starts interrogating Decker, and they get to chatting about this guy, Mackay, whose nickname in the war apparently was Old Lead Bottom because he got shot in the butt a lot. So that's cool. Sorry.
Not a lot, just once.
Well,
But I guess, you get
enough
shot
to
in
get
the butt
nickname.
once.
Yeah, true. That speaks volumes. You've never let me forget it. Old bullet ass Fred. Anyway,
that's from Generation Kill. Things have gotten a lot rougher in this man's army.
Yeah, exactly. They say ass. Anyway, Decker's sort of explaining that before he went into the time-traveling supercloud, this guy Mackay was surrounded by 7 German planes and was definitely going to die, so he has no idea how he survived to the present day of 1959.
Which kind of takes the wind out of the very good to commercial twist that they'd built up. He's, right before commercial, he's like, because he's dead.
Yeah.
And it comes back to commercial, he's like, because I think he probably is most likely dead.
Yeah. It's a bit of a downstage.
Okay.
You could have led with that.
We also learned that old Leadbottom not only is not dead, but he had quite an illustrious flying career.
Why do you keep insisting that he's dead?
Because the last I saw of him, he was caught in a circle of 7 German planes. There was nothing I could do about it. Of course, I was involved with 3 others.
Obviously, he got away.
I don't see how he could have.
Not only could have, he did. He was one of Britain's great heroes during the Blitz. That was the second war we told you about.
Won the DFC for knocking down 3 German bombers one night over London. He undoubtedly saved hundreds of lives. Maybe even thousands.
As we told you about during the commercial break.
Yeah, there's that Hitler guy we told you all about. It's kind of weird. I mean, you know, now that guy knows about World War II. So that's weird. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter as we find out later, but maybe that's a spoiler? I don't know.
It's right up there with Biff Tannen's Sports Almanac, you know?
Yeah.
You just don't tell people that. Yeah. So Decker has this story that the guy was surrounded and oh boy, he just couldn't do anything. But eventually it comes out that, in fact, Decker was a big old coward, Sisyphus, and he didn't
military
like to
terminology
fight.
There.
A whiskey delta, if you will. And he didn't like fighting so much he would go to great lengths to avoid conflict. And at some points he
I've actually fired bullets through the cockpit walls so that the chaps will see them and be impressed. God help me.
Yeah, which is pretty damn extreme.
Yeah.
Then I think
He's a
I think
thorough
we get
coward.
Right. I think we get the full explanation here.
It isn't a crime to be afraid, Decker. Every pilot's afraid at one time or another. I'm sure Mackay would understand that. What makes you think he knows, anyway?
Because it was me that let the Germans trap him.
But I thought you said you were fighting 3 German planes yourself, so how
I
come...
wasn't fighting anyone. I was running. When the Germans came at us, I left him up there to die.
Well, he didn't die!
Well, I can't understand that.
Once again, a quick acceleration there.
I get him yelling.
Yeah.
I think his performance is right. I think it's the other actor who's like... He just wants to like beat him at yelling, but it's not the right note for him to be playing at that moment. Plus, as far as just crazy notes, the guy has just said, I'm a coward who would go on missions and avoid the enemy, and I would even shoot into my own plane so people would think I was cool. And then this like major general comes up, he's like, hey, people get scared, but it's okay. Yeah. It's like, that's court-martialable offense, right?
Yeah.
Like, what in the...
That's not the
He's
military.
just trying to be the cool principal for a while.
Yeah, the cool drill sergeant.
Okay, kiddo, I get it. You know, times are tough. You got homework to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the situation is just so unorthodox that maybe the normal, like, you know, psychological abuse that you would normally lay on the guy is maybe suspended briefly in this situation.
Fair
It
enough.
reads a little bit more like a therapy sesh than a military interrogation. Anyway, they clarify that for sure Mackay survived, obviously, because he's on the way to the base, and maybe somebody helped him. And that's when Decker arrives on the thought, maybe, just maybe, it was me. And I've got to go back to the past.
Mm-hmm. So he hooks up with Doc Brown.
Exactly. Huey Lewis kicks in.
Yeah, the power of love rips in. Yeah, it's sweet.
He clocks Major Hank and then another unnamed military dude who earned a SAG card and runs out onto the tarmac. I have the note that his running is very fey and British. The way he runs, I guess it's like when you're running in jodhpurs, it's kind of hard to maintain your dignity, but the way he also starts up the propeller of his old-timey plane, it's got a very, like, silent film feel to it. But anyway, he gets in the plane in the new Newman 82 or whatever it is, and hits somebody else. But at the very last minute, Hank, I'm just going to roll with his name being Hank, even though I'm not at all sure if that's the case. The military subordinate dude catches up with him and holds a gun straight to Decker's face, telling him to get out. But Decker, kind of, you know, more of a badass than any British person has ever been, just says, like, shoot, buddy, I don't give a blighter's bum. But sorry, God, I know we have some British listeners. I probably should pull back on that. Luke,
well,
Tom, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. This is just some leftover feelings from the Revolutionary War. No, he takes off, so he's very brave and cool. In the next scene, we're back in 1959, aka the time period that is cheaper to film, and Vice Marshal Mackay has arrived, and surprise, surprise, in a little drill-down story, he confirms everything that Decker said.
You see, we were out on patrol together. Now, as a rule, we'd have split up, but on that day we were flying together. When a flight of Germans dropped down on us.
You fought them together?
Well, not at first.
What do you mean, sir?
Well, I had a feeling that old Terry was lighting out on me.
He flew away?
Yes. Climbed high. Disappeared in a cloud.
A white cloud, sir?
I don't know. I suppose so.
And then?
Well, then, out of nowhere, it seemed, Terry came diving down, his gun chattering away. He got 3 of the blighters before they got him. Saved my life.
And he did get back.
Back in time.
That guy's kind of got like a Southern Californian British accent. Kind of comes and goes. He said the word blighters right, but I think beyond that, it's a little bit up and down.
He's very, very patient with them. Like, was it a white cloud?
That was such a dumb question.
Yes, I don't know. Yeah, it probably was a white cloud.
That is the most vivid aspect of that memory. What is it, one of those rare white clouds we keep hearing about?
It's okay, I guess, with the way the story resolves in the end, but it is a little weird that he's like, it looked like Terry was leaving me to die. Yeah. Terry.
Yo, Terry.
You had to know him.
Yeah, exactly. But it ends on kind of like a sort of a weird note when the story gets wrapped up. And as they're sort of standing in awe and appreciation of Decker's time travel bravery, sort of to confirm it all, Hank puts a button on it by referring to Mackay as Old Lead Bottom, which earlier had been explained was a sort of a private joke between the two men. And Old Lead Bottom's reaction is timpani worthy. What did you say? And then
they also divvy up all of Decker's stuff, so
true,
to sell on the black market.
Right. And that's the charming, heartwarming end to this dignified episode.
Dialogue from a play, Hamlet to Horatio. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Dialogue from a play written long before men took to the sky. There are more things in heaven and earth and in the sky that perhaps can be dreamt of. And somewhere in between heaven, the sky, the earth, lies the Twilight Zone.
I feel like literally every line of every Shakespeare play has been used in a Rod Serling outro.
There is a line from Titus Andronicus.
It reminds me of this airplane time travel episode. Yeah, I don't have a lot of deep insight about it. It's a very, it's a Matheson story. It's kind of shows the hallmarks of being just focused on a tightly told yarn. There's not a lot of brush with philosophy.
Yeah, it's much more plot heavy than the characters aren't all that developed, but I think they're given kind of sketches, but I feel like the actor carries it through enough. Pilot? Yeah, the main character, I think, with his acting conveys enough, even though I don't think we get a hugely deep or particularly deep character. I mean, he's kind of a coward, but he has to come into his own at the end and embrace
Well, I think that's
his
what's
fate.
cool about it is that it's a nice marriage between a pretty standard time travel type story and a character piece about a guy who's a bit of a coward and redeems himself. It probably would have been acceptable if it was just a time travel thing, but I think it gives it an urgency and a resonance because the character and is well defined enough, and as you said, the actor does a pretty good job with it.
Right, you could compare it to Odyssey of Flight 33, which is kind of just people in a plane, and it's a straight, they travel to different times, and they kind of are endlessly keep trying to find the right time, but there isn't really a character thing driving this. There isn't, an emotional thing driving the story. In fact, they went ahead and brought in the least emotional actor they have.
I'd love
John
to see
Anderson
that
or
guy
whatever
in
his
this
name
one.
is.
I've got to go back to save old Lead Bottom. But even
I'm telling you, I left him to die. I should not have done it, I suppose. I'll probably get back about now.
I gotta get
See
going.
ya. Shoot me if you must, I guess. But I'm gonna try and get going.
Safe
here.
home now. Yeah, I think even more so than that too, because they could have made a more standard episode, or they could have made a story that was just like, I've got to get back there to save my best bud, Leadbutt. But the fact that he was a coward and is redeeming himself, just just the more details, the better for this kind of story. So I don't know, it's just very tightly woven yarn. It really is hard to think of much to say about it other than like it's a Twilight Zone episode about time travel on the plane, and there are a lot of those, but I feel like we've kind of covered that ground. And
yeah, I think Matheson said the germ of the idea came with this image of a World War I plane on the tarmac with a bunch of modern planes, and it is a little bit of a shame of us not being able to appreciate at the time, like we said at the beginning, because I could see how that might be a somewhat startling image, but I don't know, even would it be that arresting if you were watching something today and like that World War I plane lands on the deck of an aircraft carrier or something?
I mean, I think it would.
I don't know. I'd just be like, that's neat.
Just turn it off. Just change it to the Stillers. Stillers are off.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's it's the classic problem of time travel episodes set in the past. I think that like, it would make more of an impression now, but I don't know. It's cool enough.
We didn't really get a good sense of the pilot being so confused or really being aware of how different things were until he looks out that window. I mean, he kind of checks out the woman as he's walking by, but he's not really like stunned by the fact that there are these huge modern bombers or whatever there are around him.
Like,
he just rolls with it way too cool. But he is British, so
stiff upper lip and all that, whatnot. Heave ho, right on, Jerry. Damn the torpedoes. Sorry, I have nothing but.
Yes, people in the RAF were constantly damning the torpedoes.
It came to mind.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Foxtrot, Zickery, Martin Grams Jr., Zickery and Grams, and IMDb.
We talked about this way back when at some point, where I've noticed this thing about whenever there's military things in a movie or TV show, people crawl out of the woodwork on IMDb to point out any inaccuracy. Listeners, if you want to see this is the best example I've ever seen, because someone kind of went in and like formulated tables or something to really pick this episode apart. Check out the IMDb trivia page of this episode. Yeah. I'm not going to read them all. It's perfect. There's like 40 things. If you go by the like goofs and trivia, apparently this was like the worst episode ever made. It's just like
someday
incoherent.
I'm gonna make a movie that is just the most boring, mistake-riddled movie with tons of plot holes and weird errors, but all of the military stuff is going to be perfect.
All the uniforms are just going to be spot on. Everyone's going to salute the right person. It's just going to be great.
Called Pips, the movie.
Fred alluded to enough of it in his
some of that was
intro,
real.
But
the fruit
I don't know
salad
if you
was a little bit of a free ball, but yeah.
Moving on from that stuff, part of the production was filmed on location at Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, California. The vintage 1918 Newport 28 biplane was owned and flown by Frank Gifford Tallman. It had previously appeared in many World War I motion pictures. Yeah, according to Mark Scott Zickery's Twilight Zone companion, I think one of the producers or someone says it was kind of a spectacle landing the plane there, because all the aviation guys who actually worked at the field kind of did crowd around it and were pretty shocked and awed to see this. I mean, they knew it was... they weren't like, what in the world is this doing here? But they just had never seen a plane that old. So according to IMDb, this episode is similar to... Or maybe Wiki, this episode is similar to the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Yesterday's Enterprise. Fred, can you confirm that?
Was that
is
on...
That true?
Where did you read that? Oh,
IMDb trivia.
A listener,
Wiki,
Jay Spence, wrote in with the same thing. I wonder if... Jay, are you just cribbing off IMDb, or maybe he was the one who put it in?
Oh, Jay.
Yes,
it's true.
It is
either way
very similar. Buckle up. So it takes place. No, there's like a ship coming out of like a wormhole that is coming out of a battle that was like, I don't know, 40 years before, and they barely survive it, but they have to go back in to like set the future right. It's a great episode of Star Trek Next Generation. I think like certainly it's one of the better ones of the series and has a lot in common with this. I'm not sure if it was like a direct reference, but you know there's a lot of ties between TZ and Star Trek, so it's certainly plausible.
Did you have any other trivia from
Yeah,
Mr.
Martin
Grahams
Grams has
Jr.?
like a lot of trivia for this episode. Some of it is of the 22 horsepower Newport 28 140 mile per hour horsepower rotary plant variety. A couple interesting things. One is that I think this was actually the first episode that was written by another writer that was not Serling. I think that they were relying on other writers to sort of help out, but this was the first one where the teleplay was actually penned by Matheson.
Yeah, I believe Matheson had a story that Serling adapted earlier, but this was the first one he got to write himself, based on one of his short stories, which is called Flight.
And he talks, Matheson has a quote that Grams writes where he says, "I liked Flight," recalled Matheson. "It was his flight from his cowardice and a flight from the past to the future," and so on. The last flight sort of narrows it down. It's always fun to do that. Nick of time, that's good. Steel refers to the strength of his personality, plus the fact that these robots are made out of steel. Spur of the moment. I love titles like that. So he's just talking about how the title really got him going. There's a lot of, sort of interesting stuff from a minutia perspective, but no real smoking guns here, so I'm just gonna use this as a official recommendation to go out and buy the Grams book if you want to know how much it costs to pay the lead actor for his performance.
The lead actor being Kenneth Haig as Flight Lieutenant Decker.
Lieutenant Decker, John.
Lieutenant. Well, it's both in this, Okay, so he played Brutus in Cleopatra. So that's something. He apparently set the precedent for the British angry young man role when he originated the part of Jimmy Porter on stage in the play Look Back in Anger in 1957. Richard Burton played the character in the 1959 film Look Back in Anger, which I feel like I should check out since I now understand that the Oasis song Don't Look Back in Anger was a reference of some sort that I never picked up on before. So that's interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. Robert Warwick played Air Vice Marshal Alexander Mackay. He starred in the Broadway stage show Drifting in 1922 that featured a still wet behind the ears Humphrey Bogart. Yeah. Bogart remembered his kindness during the play's run and 28 years later insisted on hiring Warwick to play a juicy role in his film In a Lonely Place, which is actually a pretty cool movie. It's about a screenwriter who gets involved in a noir plot.
Oh, that's cool. I'd actually never heard of it.
Yeah, I saw it like a year or two ago. It's pretty good. I don't really have interesting trivia for the other actors. As we said, it was written by Matheson. It was directed by William F. Claxton, who directed several other episodes. I Sing the Body Electric, Little People, and The Jungle. And that brings us to the
Inevitable.
MST3K.
So we like to find connections between Mystery Science Theater 3000, the show, and the Twilight Zone. What do we got this week?
Stunt pilot Frank Gifford Tallman was a stunt pilot in a large amount of films and television shows, various things. And Fred, I'm sure you'll remember, he was a stunt pilot in San Francisco International, a 6th season episode of MST3K.
That's actually kind of funny because there are shots in San Francisco International of the little stunt, the prop plane that the lost boy, the child of divorce, steals. There are shots of that plane that look sort of similar to the shots in Last Flight, so not so far-fetched.
So IMDb gives this episode an 8.1, which is
kind of like higher part of the middle, or a lower part of the top. I really like this episode. I mean, I think it's very straightforward. It doesn't really take you by surprise. You kind of see where it's going from the very beginning, but it's just very well executed. It moves along. There's like a few little like reveals, like twists and turns that kind of keep you moving through the plot. I think the pilot does a really good job as an acting performance. As a pilot, he's obviously horrible, but the actor did a good job. So I don't know. I think it's kind of like in the 7+, 8- range for me. How about you? It's not remarkable, but it's very good.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I think it's just. I think maybe it's just a Matheson story in general. It's really well told. I think the character, like I said, it's not super deep, but it gives you enough to have some kind of emotional through line.
Well,
to
it's
it.
like, in Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, another Matheson episode on an airplane. It's like, it would be scary with anybody, but you've got this guy who just got out of a nervous breakdown on a plane, and his wife, the emotional stakes heightened this sort of like thrills and chills.
Exactly. I do think the lead actor gives a good performance. I think the other actors around him are maybe not quite as strong, but, that's fine. Overall, one thing I meant to say, I think it's kind of funny the dynamic they create of the guy he abandoned eventually saving a bunch of people in the Blitz and being responsible for saving hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. It's kind of a It's a Wonderful Life vibe to it, because George Bailey saves his little brother, who ends up saving all these people's lives when he fights in World War II.
It's also kind of a relief that the guy ends up dying in the gunfight because he knew about Hitler and World War II.
We wouldn't want to stop any of that.
Well, I was being ironic, because if he went back and just saved himself, he probably could have saved a lot more lives.
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, how, what could one crazy pilot have done against the weight of all that history?
Just crashed
moving
his plane
forward
into Hitler's backyard.
Well, I mean, did they go into all that detail, or did they just say there's going to be another war and there'll be a thing?
Fair enough. Move on.
But,
the commercial break was kind of long.
Actually,
you never know.
Right, they're giving him coordinates and everything.
Yeah,
I guess long story short, I agree with you. This isn't an episode that I loved or was like, oh, this is one of the best I've seen, but it's just very well put together, and there's nothing that I can point to of like, oh, that was dumb. Or it's well done. So I'd say like 8-.
Yeah, I'm going to say 7+, because as I've learned, the plus makes it feel good, even though it's a lower score. I just had the thought of, like, in the commercial break, them showing him like Ken Burns' war documentary or something like that.
I just envision them like they're both taking sips from their mugs while they lean in to whisper with each other, like on a late night talk show as they go to commercial.
Right, exactly. Right, good point. Cool. Yep. So that episode was a request from somebody.
That was a request by Gregory via Gmail.
Cool. Thank you, Gregory, for getting in touch via Gmail. Next week, we don't exactly know what we're going to do because I'm going to be in Germany and John is going to be the Steelers pre-season warm-up or something. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So just stay in touch with all of our social media platforms to find out what's coming. What are all those social media platforms? Any email addresses, John?
People could send us an email at twilightpwn, pwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at twilightpwn. You can check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com. You can check us out or listen to us on various internet podcast streaming things like Stitcher or TuneIn Radio. And you could subscribe to us in iTunes if you're over there. If you'd leave us a review, we would really appreciate it. It helps get the word out about our show. To that end, could we go ahead and just say thank you to J212321 for leaving us a review. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jay.
And I don't believe we've kind of been a little chaotic around here. Also, thank you to Opsimath for Logic for your review. We appreciate them both.
Yeah. And I just want to get it on record that I have nothing against British people, especially Tom Elliott of the Twilight Zone podcast. There's an upstanding Brit.
Before we wind things up, we gotta pull out our favorite old clip.
I hate to tell you, but I'm afraid this time you pulled a boner.
Listener Keith Walker pointed out that a couple of weeks ago in the discussion on Dead Man's Shoes, we mentioned the director Hal Ashby, and said that he directed a movie called Being Human. That was just a flub on my part. The name of the movie was Being There. Being Human is a Robin Williams movie I never actually saw. Being There is a very clever, funny movie with Peter Sellers. So, check that movie out.
And if it makes you feel any better, on the Nick of Time episode, every time I referred to William Shatner as superstitious, I said suspicious. Like, literally every time.
Well, he was. There was something suspicious about that character.
Boners are flying.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'll talk to you next week, John. Or I'll talk to you whenever. Gosh, who knows when I'll talk to you next.
Exactly. Talk to you later, Fred.
Laters.